Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly podcast. I am Tony Gerdeman here, as always, with Tom Orr. Tom, how you doing?
Good. Had a nice chat with Ryan Day,
really?
Greg Mattison, and Kevin Wilson. It was, things are going pretty well around Columbus. I think everyone's in a pretty good mood today.
I think everybody is in a good mood because it's a week off, and everybody loves a week off. And so this is our only opportunity to speak with the head coach and his cohorts on an interesting session today. There's a lot said by all of the guys, and that's always the case with Kevin Wilson.
Mm-hmm.
But Ryan Day was talking about what they'll be doing this week, and this is an area where there's a lot of self-evaluation that goes in terms of seeing what they do on offense, what their tendencies are. But it's also, Tom, is interesting to me is this being the half point of the regular season, it's also an opportunity for them to just sit down with every player and basically tell them where they stand. There are going to be a lot of uncomfortable conversations this week because, as Ryan Day has always said, now that they're in this transfer portal, you have to maintain like 100% honesty with these kids because they can leave at any time. So you have to let them know where they stand so that they don't feel betrayed, so that they understand what they have to do to get to where they want to be. So there's going to be a lot of those talks this weekend. I don't expect now you've gone past the point of transferring at midseason, basically, because you've got those 4 games, or at least most of the guys do. But it's going to be some uncomfortable conversations, but some necessary talks with some players who, I'm sure everybody wants to know where they stand, and this week they'll find out.
Yeah, this seems like something that generally was something that happened more at the end of the season in prior years. And a lot like the early signing period has kind of sped up the clock on the recruiting calendar. The transfer portal has essentially turned it into a year-round conversation. And, during the typical game week, you just don't have time to do this kind of stuff. With the week off, they have an opportunity to kind of circle, take a step back, evaluate where everyone is, and there is a team portion of this, which is you're evaluating the team itself and where can they get better, what can they do better, what might they want to do differently.
Even the coaches.
Yeah, exactly. And then on the individual player level, guys who are playing some probably want to play more. I mean, Greg Mattison talked about the fact that you got Brendon White, you've got Pete Werner, you've got Justin Hilliard, you got Jocelyn Wint, all at that kind of Sam spot and the bullet spot kind of smushed together. And he said, they've gotten good production out of them, but all of them, he's sure, want to play more. I mean, that's, if you are a high-level college football player, you always want to be on the field more. You don't want to be watching. And with the snaps split as much as they have been, some of those guys have probably been watching a little more than they would have wanted to. So you can have conversations with those guys about, okay, here's what, if you can do these things, you can be on the field more in different situations. And then there are the other conversations with the guys who are probably not playing a lot right now. Here's what you need to do to get on the field at some point later in the season.
And since you mentioned Brendon White, let's go ahead and talk about him because he was a topic of conversation today. Played I think he had 17 snaps against Michigan State. He's a guy that you almost don't see out there until late this season. And what Greg Mattison and also what Ryan Day said is that he's still learning that position. And maybe it's our fault for thinking everything was just going to go smoothly at the start of the season, or maybe it's our fault for seeing the shiny object of the bullet and just being enamored with it and talking about it and writing about it. But this is still I guess it's a work in progress in terms of, as Greg Mattison said, this is a safety last year who has now had to learn to become a linebacker. And as Ryan Day said, he's had to move around his entire time at Ohio State, and this is where he is now. And you wonder, this is one of those talks with Brendon White. Yeah, I'm sure, as somebody mentioned today, he was the Rose Bowl MVP for defense. And so you're expecting he probably played, I don't know, maybe 60 snaps in that game, and probably hasn't played 60 snaps in the last 3 games. And so this is a guy who entered the season, was initially nervous about this position change because what it might be, but then as he learned more about it, he was excited about it because he finally had a home. But then you get to the season, and it's like, well, yes, you have a home. We don't really need it right now. It's more of a vacation home that we're going to like Airbnb out to some people. And, we still value this home and we'll eventually still spend some time there. And that might happen in the second half of the season. But he is an interesting case study in the evolution of this defense. And I guess what it takes to just deal with having playing time and expectations and then almost having it just ripped away from you by a new regime change.
Yeah, and as a lawnmower rides right in front of the car, which it hasn't rained in Columbus in like 3 months. My grass hasn't grown an inch.
This might be the final mow of the year.
Yeah. Well, they're getting their money's worth.
They'll wait until we're back here. How could their mow schedule be the exact same as our podcast recording schedule?
So back to Brendon White. Speaking of people who are maybe a little off schedule this week.
Yes.
He's someone who probably has opportunities ahead. He's not someone who I anticipate seeing looking to leave. Probably. And that's not based on any inside information. That's just he has seen himself have a role on this team in the past, and it's probably a little bit easier to accept the fact that you're in a smaller role this year because it's been a successful defense. Last year, you saw a lot of people, a lot of football parents sort of agitating for the fact that different people should be on the field. That's a much easier thing to think when you're giving up 30, 40 points a game.
Yes.
When you're one of the top 5 defenses in the country, it's like, well, I would like to see different people out there, but the people out there right now are doing generally a pretty good job. So
yeah, it is interesting to look at what this defense is now. And the secondary is basically 3 corners and a safety.
Mm-hmm.
So what does that do for your safety recruiting? We already saw Isaiah Pryor left.
Mm-hmm.
He's like, well, I can see what this defense is. There's no room for 2 safeties. And, there still is. Josh Proctor played, 17 snaps, I think, last week. So there is kind of, but you obviously want to play more than that. And I wonder what this defense looks like next year if 2 safeties are 2 of the 4 best guys. Does it revert back to something else? Because I wonder how much, and I asked, we talked with Ryan Day and Greg Mattison about this today, like how much of this year's defense is the way it is simply because they have Shaun Wade? And what happens when they don't have that third corner? What does it look like then? And I guess that's something we'll talk about in the offseason ad nauseum because we won't know. But you understand why Isaiah Pryor left. You would understand, Brendon White has a completely different situation in being a Buckeye legacy, and we don't like to speculate on transfers. But you wonder how much room there is for safeties, multiple safeties in this defense.
Well, you get the sense that they really love what they have this year with the 3 corners, with Okudah, Arnett, and Wade. And you asked the questions about what they get out of Wade, and Greg Mattison said he gives them a matchup that most people don't have. Like you can, that slot receiver in the college game is so important now because that's a much easier throw, kind of the slants and the quick stuff inside. That's a much easier throw for the most quarterbacks than something, further outside, the big guys outside, running outside the numbers. So the slot guy has become a bigger part of most teams' offenses. So that slot corner, that third corner, is a huge part of your defense. Most teams don't have the luxury of having the former number 2 corner in the entire nation, who is 6'2" or something like that, be their slot corner. Like that's generally, that's Brandon Watson, and he's okay, but
is he?
Yeah, sometimes. Next year, there's a possibility that there will be multiple Ohio State corners leaving early for the NFL after this season. That's not a guarantee. I think you're very likely going to lose at least 1 and possibly 2 guys early. In which case, you're basically starting from scratch at corner next year. And so then how likely is it you're going to have 3 corners as good as this next year? Probably not great. So the defense next year may not look quite like the defense this year.
Yeah, and this is always, as we say, a plug-and-play defense, and they might be plugging in different positions next year to get that job done. just looking at everything that Ryan Day had to say today and trying to see what we want to talk about here. Oh, the head coaching, the NFL job. Ryan Day, if you guys haven't seen, Washington fired head coach Jay Gruden a few days ago, and so immediately speculation started to maybe point towards Ryan Day, because I don't know if you know this, Tom, he coached Washington's rookie quarterback, Dwayne Haskins, in college.
When was this?
This was in college. No.
When Ryan Day was in college?
No.
Oh, okay.
When the quarterback, I believe it was Dwayne Haskins, was in college. They know each other from college. They didn't go together, but in college. But so obviously they point at Ryan Day, and he gave the answer that, first of all, Washington has not called him. Second of all, he's not going to talk about this. And no matter how many times he was asked, and he would answer the questions, but then say, I'm not going to talk about it. Mm-hmm. Basically saying, he's happy here, whether, he hopes to be here 5, 10, 20 years down the road. And that's pretty much what you would, I guess, Ohio State fans, that's as much as you could have hoped for from him, other than the direct, hell no, I'm staying here.
Here's if you were an Ohio State fan concerned that Ryan Day might be leaving to go coach the Washington Redskins, consider his options here. He can take a program which he is currently running with a staff he likes, players he likes, that is generating fantastic on-field results, for which the recruiting is continuing to absolutely roll for the next couple of years. Or he can go work for Dan Snyder. Which one of those two things sounds better to you?
Well, you'd have to do a pros and cons list. You get out the paper, you sit at the dining room table with the wife, and you put it right down the middle, pros, cons, and you see which has more. And at the end of the day, you don't know until you do the list.
Without having done the list, I have a feeling I know how that might shake out. But you mentioned his wife, and his wife was part of the decision to sort of stay in the college game and try and get a head coaching job in the college game. He said, basically, they moved 3 times in the span of 3 years. He said the exact quote was, "That wasn't good." And it was very much, and this is one of the things that kind of gets lost as everyone's kind of trying to move these chess pieces around the coaching board and all that. There are other people whose lives are involved in these moves, not just the coach, and they are people that the coach actually cares about on a personal level, such as his wife and children. And he said, 3 years in a row, kids having to move to a new city, new school, make new friends. Your wife moves to a new city, has to make new friends. Like, that's not easy. That's if you have moved and you're not somewhere where you know a lot of people and you're kind of starting over, that can be hard. And especially for the wife of a head coach who is probably working a lot of 60 and 70 hour weeks at least during the course of the season. Like that is a tough spot to be in. And he sounded like he was genuinely not interested in putting his family through that again. And they're in a great spot right now. They've been here 3 years. They've set down roots. They've got the foundation locally, all of that stuff. There's no reason to leave that. There's nothing about that unless you are dead set on, I definitely want to be a NFL head coach, that would make you leave. And nothing in Ryan Day's career path right now suggests that being an NFL head coach is his top goal.
And if he did, it wouldn't be the Redskins. You don't take the first job that comes along. Everybody knows that. Chris Ash. It wasn't, he said after those three years, and his quote was, "I said never again." And you mentioned his wife, Nina, and you think about it, when it is just, he's working 60, 70 hours, it's just her and the kids, and you don't have people that you know, and you do feel like your walls are closing in around you, and it's never just the coach. And the coaches will always say, they wouldn't be able to do it without their wives being supportive of what they do, because there's a difference between being a wife and a coach's wife. And it takes a different kind. But even that different kind can only handle so much. And just as the coaches, they're all different kinds, but they can only handle so much. And I don't even know why you would leave this place for a place that you pretty much know is going to be a failure, because that's what Washington is.
Yeah, yes, I'm sure he would love to work with Terry McLaurin and Dwayne Haskins again, but that's not the circumstance you'd want to do it in. And yeah, I get that had to be asked today, and now it's been addressed. But
yep.
Yeah, that nothing about that makes sense.
Now, when the Browns fire Freddie Kitchens, now you get a chance to work for a winning franchise like the Browns. Now it becomes a different thing. Ryan Day was asked about his special teams, and I agreed with everything he said. Said it's been solid. The blocking of the kicks has been good. They missed a couple that they probably should have had last week. Punt game has been solid. Coverage has been good, but the return game could be better. And Tom, I wonder if there was somebody on this team who could help that return game, specifically, well, even in kickoff returns, but the punt return game, I wish there was somebody out there, somebody dynamic, perhaps a young guy, perhaps a freshman, who could help that run return game. But alas, there just is nobody available.
Yeah, I mean, hypothetically, if you had a player on your team who had returned a punt for 52 yards in his very first time, after the long punt return on your team since 2015 was 38, hypothetically, if such a person existed, that person could, in fact, make that kind of impact in the kicking game. But
hypothetically.
But there's a certain amount of risk aversion that goes into all of this, and this goes into the same conversation as the why did you kick field goal on 4th and 3 when the numbers clearly say you should go. And there is any head coach is going to have hesitance to put a true freshman like Garrett Wilson in that spot, because with as good as the offense has been going right now, there's no reason to not. They don't need to make big plays in the special teams. The offense is getting 7 yards of play or something like that at this point. So basically the kick return game is largely what it has been almost throughout the Urban Meyer era, which is just don't screw this up, and the offense will go put the points on the board. You just make sure you catch the football and let the offense get the ball back.
It's funny that when it was Paris Campbell, it was pretty dynamic. Everybody but Paris Campbell, and it's been very mediocre. And I'm thinking maybe Demario McCall was injured, because why else have KJ Hill back there? No offense to KJ Hill, but he's not your first choice as a kick returner. He's the punt returner because he catches the ball, basically. So I was a little surprised to see him there at kick returner, but then the lack of seeing Demario in the game kind of that made me think he was injured. Plus, I also saw him limping after the game. I don't know. Maybe the two were connected there, but it would be nice to see a dynamic return game. But at this point, you are picking nits. You are looking for something, But that's what this week is also about. This is the week to nitpick for the coaches, and especially for us, as we try to find stuff for you for us to complain about. And we're trying hard, and that return game
certainly
is. But also, Tom, kickoff returns are almost dead.
Yeah, that is a shrinking portion of the game nationally, not just at Ohio State. And it's so easy now for teams to just kind of pop the ball up, make it not very returnable, and put you in a position where the smart play is to just fair catch it. So, with as much as that's being de-emphasized, they have shown an inclination to at least try some younger guys there. You saw Jamison Williams out there 2 weeks ago, but then he, it was like last year, Demario McCall muffed the kickoff against Michigan and turned it over, and then you didn't really see Demario McCall out there anymore. Jamison Williams muffed the kickoff 2 weeks ago, right? And they recovered it, but you're probably not going to see him out there for a little while until they can, that he can win himself back in their good graces, because they do have options. There's never a shortage of skill talent on this team to be back there and return a kick. So if you mess one up, it may take a while till your number comes up.
Well,
again.
And you do wonder, like, if when Jamison Williams is back there again, he's not going to be thinking about all of the kickoffs he's caught in practice. He's going to be thinking about the one that he did not catch in the game.
Yeah. And
he probably caught 80 between that in practice, but those 80 don't matter. And then once you secure it and then go, you'll be fine. We talked quite a bit about Zach Harrison after the Michigan State game because he was very involved. I thought he played a lot more than he did. I thought he was like, because it is hard to see first of all, it's hard to see the numbers from up in the press box. Like, I didn't even realize, like, you couldn't even see Javonte Jean-Baptiste, the 8, and he's just a single digit. It's hard to make all of that stuff out. So I thought Zach Harrison was in there a lot more than he was. I think it was, 14 snaps for him. But he did so much in those 14 snaps that you assume he was out there for more because you don't expect a guy to show up every single time he's out there. That doesn't happen. But given the amount of times we saw his name, or you see him out there, or you hear his name, or you see him on TV, I just assumed he was out there more. So I guess that's a good sign that he didn't play as much as he did, and yet still had as much impact as you would expect somebody who played twice as many snaps.
Right. He is so far ahead of schedule right now. It's crazy. He's ahead of schedule in terms of being on the field in big situations. He's also ahead of schedule in terms of being an impact player on the field in those situations. Because you look back a year ago, Tyreek Smith was on the field somewhat fairly early. You saw him in like the Rushman package last year.
But he
didn't really do that much. He was there and was like, oh, he kind of, there he is. Look at him. He's playing. That's good.
Oh, you scamp.
And every once in a while he'd do something or, get a quarterback hurry or something like that. But he wasn't like a real impact player as a true freshman. Zach Harrison's already starting to be an impact player. And like when I'm thinking back to Tyreek Smith, I'm thinking back to the Michigan State game last year, which was November. This is like a month earlier. Yeah. I mean, he's ahead of where Tyreek Smith was a year ago on a couple different fronts. And I mean, Tyreek Smith is someone who, if you had a Tyreek Smith career trajectory, you're probably going to end up in a pretty good place. So to be ahead of that is, then you're starting to get into the Chase Young kind of career trajectory. And, if you look at the recruiting rankings, that's not an unreasonable outcome. And there's a long way to go between true freshman Chase Young and junior year Chase Young. But, there are a lot of elements of Zach Harrison's game and what we've seen out of Zach Harrison already that's like, yeah, they might have that guy again next year.
Yeah, and the thing is, Greg Mattison said he wasn't surprised by the way Zach Harrison has progressed. But I agree, he is ahead of schedule. But I don't think those two things are mutually exclusive because you can acknowledge that he is ahead of schedule, but you can also acknowledge, well, given how the skill set that he has, it doesn't surprise me that he is ahead of schedule. And I think that's where he is right now. And the good thing is his snaps are only going to increase. And right now, he is already making an impact in terms of even against the run. He's not just some guy who only rushes the passer. He's doing a lot right now. And anytime you talk to the coaches about him, as physically gifted as we know he is, and he's more physically gifted than maybe any player or person in the country, they always talk about how hard he works, how much he wants to get better, and his character, and just all of the stuff that gets a guy over the top and turns them into a great player is what the coaches always rave about with him. And it's going to be fun to watch him for the next 2 years until he is the number 2 draft pick or number 3 draft pick in the 2022 draft, depending on whatever quarterback is coming out that year.
Is Joe Milton eligible that year?
He could be. He could be eligible, yes, probably. Almost certainly.
The thing that's kind of interesting in terms of how Ohio State's defensive end recruiting is that you have these guys who are these 5-star prospects who overlap. Mm-hmm. So you had Joey Bosa and Nick Bosa. They didn't overlap, but there was obviously a pre-existing relationship there from which the younger brother could perhaps learn a little bit from the older brother. Then you had Chase Young behind Nick Bosa. So Chase Young can look at Nick Bosa, what Nick Bosa is doing, how Nick Bosa is working. Now you got Zach Harrison behind Chase Young for a year. In a couple of years, you've got Jack Sawyer coming in, 5-star prospect, 2021 class. He should overlap at least a year with Zach Harrison. I mean, it's kind of this like ladder of, the passing of the torch almost in the defensive line room And, Larry Johnson is Larry Johnson, and Larry Johnson gets results that no one else in the country gets. And a lot of the credit has to go to them. But just having sort of the model in front of you. They talked about that today in terms of JT Barrett and how JT Barrett had kind of modeled the game prep and what that needed to look like for Dwayne Haskins and Joe Burrow. You've got that in the defensive line room as well, where you have that just absolutely elite guy who is going to be a top 5 type NFL draft pick. That's a very easy guy to look at and go, oh, I want to do what he's doing, and follow that lead. And then, a couple of years from now, then you're the old guy who's the old head who is
thank you,
who is setting the example for the.
We have to stay hip for our listeners. We have to sound young. You mentioned JT Barrett. I thought it was interesting that his name came up today when Justin Fields was a topic and Kevin Wilson was asked about his toughness and what he knew about Justin Fields. And Kevin Wilson immediately went to JT Barrett because he knew about JT Barrett from watching him at Indiana. He knew what kind of player he was, what kind of leader he was, how hard he worked. And so when he got here, he saw everything. He knew what to expect, and he saw it and was impressed by it. And he didn't have any of that knowledge about Justin Fields, so that concerned him. And when, he was asked, what did you think about Justin Fields, or, what were your thoughts when he was coming in? Wilson said, my thoughts immediately went to JT Barrett and how well he prepared, and I had no idea if this guy would be like that. And I'm sure that was a great concern, but his concerns have been alleviated. He is a good preparer. Toughness was also talked about, and all of these things that Kevin Wilson was concerned about with Justin Fields, and same with Ryan Day, because they didn't know. Ryan Day knew what Dwayne Haskins was capable of because he saw it in 2017 and also 2016 in practice. You don't know what Fields is in terms of toughness, in terms of leadership, but as we talk about every week, he continues to check off all of these things, and as he's doing that, he's endearing himself to his teammates, and you see that every week as well. He's taking shots. He's getting back up. Teams can adopt the attitude of their quarterback. Look at LSU. They are adopting a lot of attitude right now because Joe Burrow has a lot of that. And that quarterback, whether he's a captain or not, leads the team. And right now they're following him because of everything that it's the preparation, it's the toughness, it's the fact that he is able to produce. You can talk tough and you can be tough, but if you suck on the field, and you can't complete a pass, what good does it do? And he's hitting all the right notes, and his teammates are following him right now.
Yeah, this goes back to the Nick Bosa thing that we were just talking about. It's very easy to be the leader when you're the guy who's going to be the top 5 NFL draft pick. Like, Justin Fields is probably in the Heisman conversation already for this year. He is someone whose physical skills, arm strength, speed, intelligence, ability to read a defense, all of that is going to put him probably first-round NFL draft pick a year from now. All of that makes you someone who people want to follow. If you are, by all accounts, a really good kid, someone that the players have taken to very quickly, all of that kind of adds up to make you someone that people want to follow as a leader. Because you're seeing the results on the field, and it's like, I can't imagine anyone in that OSU offensive meeting room is going, I don't know. The results have just been okay. Like, I think you look at what he's done the first 6 games of the year. It's like, yep, sign me up for more of that.
yes. Let's what they're not going to be like. You know what? Let's see what Chugs can do. Let's see what else we got here. Talking about the toughness of the offensive line. I like that Kevin Wilson today said, he's not sure how well the offensive line played against Michigan State, but he knows that they were tough in doing it and that they kept pounding that rock, as he said, and eventually the rock broke and they were hitting some big shots. And it wasn't just those 5 guys doing the blocking either. He said it takes all 11 when things like that hit. And I think it was Ryan Day said, even Justin Fields carrying out his fakes and taking shots so that his running back can get more room. And just all you need is a little sliver, as we saw from J.K. Dobbins, and he's able to get that. And right now, this offense, I'll say it every week, they could throw it around if they need to. Mm-hmm. But if you don't need to throw it around, you're an idiot if you throw it around, basically.
Right. Yeah. There's so many advantages to being able to run the ball. That offense last year was the most dynamic passing attack in Ohio State history, but it was also kind of flawed. And
Yes.
when the passing didn't work, there was nothing to fall back on because they couldn't run the ball. When they can run the ball, they're going to run the ball. They want a balance, but I mean, Ryan Day talked about it all starts with being able to run the ball. If they can run the ball, that opens up everything else. Because then they have to commit so many more resources to trying to stop the run. And then that opens up all the stuff downfield. And then, and if you have the running game going, and then you can start hitting play action stuff, you're throwing to guys who are wide open downfield. So, but a lot of that stems from the threat of field in the run game.
Mm-hmm.
J.K. Dobbins running in a way that we did not see him running last year. And the offensive line, my goodness, the offensive line has been so good. Their line yards, it's a stat that, it's one of those sort of advanced analytical things that's sort of an offshoot of SP plus, where basically you get credit for every yard from 0 to 3. The line gets credit for it, and the line gets credit for like half of all yards from 4 to 6, and anything that's tackled in the backfield, you lose like 1.5 times that amount. This is really easy to follow, I know. Sure, the TLDR is if your offensive line is generating a push and opening holes and you're consistently able to hit at least 3-4 yards every time you run, that's on the offensive line generally. So the line yards in that game against Michigan State, Ohio State was like 3.0 line yards. Like every time they ran the ball, they were just getting 3 yards just based solely on the offensive line. Michigan State's was like 1.8. So that's what it looks like. That's a 1.2 yards every run. You're netting out an advantage over the opponent every single time you run the ball. And that's against a team that is renowned for having pretty good play in the trenches generally on both sides of the ball. So if you're able to dominate like that down in the trenches, that opens up everything else.
And then, as Wilson said, when you've got a guy like Justin Fields who can run and can also throw, he basically said it's a Pandora's box for the defense because there's nothing good is going to come from that as long as he executes properly. I think one of the most interesting things, and we'll start to ramp it down here, was Kevin Wilson talking about how Ryan Day has gone about game planning. And it was interesting to me because he talked about during the week, it's the assistant coach's job to get things done well enough that Ryan Day is confident and comfortable in those plays so that he remains aggressive. And I didn't really ever think about it in those terms before because I'm stupid. But just the fact that if Ryan Day doesn't go into a game feeling comfortable with everything that they've got on that sheet, you're going to, I guess, maybe second guess or slow down or just, let's go with what's safe. Let's go with JT Barrett, on 3rd and 2. But if the assistant coaches do their jobs well and the players do their jobs well, you've got a play caller as head coach who is going to be so much more willing to be aggressive and to go all out and to crank things, up on that scoreboard, as opposed to a guy who, I didn't like what I saw in practice. We're just going to have to scrap this entire sheet, this portion of the sheet. We're just going to stay on this third here. That's not been the case for this offense. And yet there's still room for it to grow. And you can tell, like, Kevin Wilson wants that to happen, and everybody in offense wants that to happen, because when you're an offensive line guy like Kevin Wilson is, those guys love that aggression as well because they love wearing that defensive line down. I just thought it was interesting when he talks about his role in keeping Ryan Day aggressive, and he even talked about it to him this past week again.
Yeah, I mean, when everything is working, that gives you so many more options, but also it forces the other team to prepare for so many more things. Because, there's always the, how much do you want to show versus how much you want to keep back. At a certain point, the opposing defense can't prepare for literally everything.
Right.
If you're doing 4 things and you're doing them really well, then that's something the opponent can go, okay, we'll prepare for these 4 things. If you're doing 16 different things, 18 different things, all of a sudden, there are not enough practice hours in the day to practice against all of the different things that an opponent's going to, that Ohio State's going to try to do someone in the 1 week of preparation you have for a game. I mean, there just literally are not enough hours in the day. And then you have offshoots of all of those things. And you keep building off of it, and you keep building it, and keep building it. When you can keep building the offense and have confidence in so many different things, not only can that overwhelm the opponent, but also it allows you to take your things that are really working, that will target particularly vulnerable areas in the opponent defense, and use those. If you have 18 different options, it gives you a lot more choice, a lot more chance to have something that's really going to work against some weakness in the opponent defense.
Yep. Looking here, anything else? We'll go ahead and wrap it up, Tom. If you got anything else that you would like to mention that we did not get mentioned that you think should be mentioned?
Well, we had said last weekend that we thought, because this was a week that we were only going to have one media availability, we were probably going to have one podcast. But you know what? Gerd said, I just want to do one podcast. And I said, no, Gerd, we're going to do two. I love and respect our listeners. They deserve 2 shows this week. So
I tried to say 3, but Tom's like, no.
I think we all know that's not true. So yeah, we'll have another show coming up later this week. And you can rate us and review us on iTunes or your podcast platform of choice. We haven't sent out goodies to people in a while,
and I still have one thing that I need to send out. So
yeah, if you leave us a rating and review, DM us a screenshot of it. We will. We have game programs and stuff from this year. It's sort of shaping up like a year you might want to have some memorabilia from. So we'll send out some goodies to people for rating and reviewing us on whatever your podcast platform of choice is.
All right. So that will do it. Thank you for listening. Make sure to check out the rest of the shows on the Ozone Radio Network with the Sloopcast on Mondays and Fridays and Silver Bullets on Tuesday. And check out everything at theozone.net, and we will talk to you later.